They found a white wolf begging for help in the southwest United States desert. Then came a miracle. The late afternoon sun hammered down on the cracked earth of southern Arizona, turning the air into shimmering waves of heat that distorted the distant mesas. Highway 86 cut through the Sonoran Desert like a scar, flanked by saguaro cacti standing sentinel over a landscape painted in shades of rust and gold. Dr. Elena Vargas gripped the steering wheel of her dusty Jeep, squinting through the windshield as the road stretched endlessly ahead. Beside her, Marcus Chen adjusted his ball cap and took another swig from his water bottle. They were wildlife biologists from the Southwest Conservation Alliance, returning from a week-long survey of pronghorn populations near the Tohono O'odham Reservation. The truck bed was loaded with camera equipment, field notes, and half-empty coolers. Elena's shoulders ached from days of hiking through unforgiving terrain, and all she wanted was a hot shower and a decent meal back in Tucson. "Another 2 hours," Marcus muttered, checking his phone. "No signal out here, just like the past 7 days. Elena nodded, her eyes scanning the roadside out of habit. Years of fieldwork had trained her to notice movement, tracks, anything out of place. That's when she saw it. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and stay with us. A flash of white against the russet sand, about 50 yards off the highway. Not the bleached white of sun-dried bones or the pale cream of desert sand. This was fur, living fur, moving weakly in the shade of an outcropping of rocks. "Marcus, look!" Elena's voice was sharp as she hit the brakes. The Jeep skidded slightly on the gravel shoulder. Marcus leaned forward, following her gaze. "What the—" They both saw it clearly now. An animal, large, wolf-like, with a coat so white it seemed to glow even in the shadow. It was lying on its side, flanks heaving, head barely lifted off the ground, and its eyes, pale amber, almost gold, were fixed directly on them. Eleanor felt her heart lurch. In 15 years of field biology, she'd seen plenty of animals in distress. Dehydrated deer, injured coyotes, even a starving mountain lion once. But this was different. The animal wasn't trying to flee. It wasn't aggressive. It was watching them with an intensity that bordered on desperation, as if it understood they were its last chance. "Is that a wolf?" Marcus whispered, though they were still inside the vehicle with the windows up. Elena's mind raced. Wolves in Arizona were rare, critically endangered Mexican gray wolves, part of a controversial reintroduction program. But Mexican wolves were gray, brown, sometimes reddish, not white. White wolves were northern animals, Arctic wolves, far from this brutal desert heat. "It can't be," she said, but she was already opening her door. "Elena, wait!" Marcus's hand shot out, but she was already stepping into the scorching afternoon. The heat hit her like a physical force. The thermometer on the dashboard had read 107 degrees, and out here, away from the Jeep's air conditioning, it felt 10 degrees hotter. Elena moved slowly, deliberately, keeping her body language non-threatening. The wolf, because yes, it was definitely a wolf, tracked her movement with those haunting eyes. As she got closer, details emerged that made her stomach clench. The wolf was emaciated, ribs visible even through its thick coat. Its breathing was labored, tongue lolling from its mouth, dark and dry. One of its hind legs was bent at an unnatural angle, and the fur around it was matted with dried blood and dirt. But worse than the physical injuries was the look in its eyes, exhaustion, pain, and something Elena had rarely seen in wild animals, a plea. "Hey there," she murmured, stopping about 15 feet away. "It's okay. We're here to help." Marcus had followed her out, medical kit in hand. He was the team's field medic, trained to handle emergency veterinary care when they were far from civilization. He crouched beside Elena, assessing the animal with professional calm. "Severe dehydration," he said quietly. "Probably hasn't had water in days. That leg is broken, maybe from a fall. And look at the paw pads. They're torn to shreds. This animal has been traveling hard and long." "From where?" Elena wondered aloud. The nearest known wolf population was hundreds of miles north, in the mountains near the New Mexico border. What was a white wolf doing in the middle of the Sonoran Desert? The wolf whimpered, a sound so heartbreaking that Elena felt tears prick her eyes. It tried to lift its head higher, ears flattening not in aggression but in submission, in trust. The animal was asking for help, as clearly as if it had spoken the words. "We need to act fast," Marcus said, pulling out a collapsible water bowl and a liter bottle. "If we don't get fluids into it soon, it won't survive the night." Elena knew the protocol. Wild wolves, especially if they were part of the reintroduction program, shouldn't be approached without proper authorization. There were laws, procedures, chains of command. But out here, in the dying light of the Arizona desert, those rules felt like distant abstractions. This was a living creature in agony, and they had the knowledge and tools to help. "Do it," she said. Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, inching closer while speaking in low, soothing tones. The wolf's eyes followed him, but the animal didn't growl or bare its teeth. Instead, when Marcus placed the water bowl near its muzzle, the wolf dipped its nose in and drank with desperate gulping sounds. Elena felt her chest tighten. The animal's trust was both beautiful and terrible. Something had driven this wolf across hundreds of miles of hostile desert. Something had pushed it to the brink of death, and somehow, against all odds, it had found them. As the sun dipped lower, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Elena pulled out her satellite phone. No matter what regulations they might be breaking, they needed backup. They needed a veterinarian, a transport vehicle, and answers. But as she dialed the emergency line for the Alliance's headquarters, one question burned in her mind above all others. Where had this white wolf come from? And what had happened to make it risk everything to find help in the middle of nowhere? The satellite phone crackled with static before Dr. Patricia Reeves's voice came through, sharp and authoritative even across the digital distance. "Vargas, what's your location?" Elena rattled off the coordinates while watching Marcus work. He'd managed to get nearly a liter of water into the wolf, and now he was carefully examining the broken leg. The animal lay still, its breathing slightly more regular, those amber eyes half closed in exhaustion. "We've got a wolf here, Pat. White coat, severely injured and dehydrated. It needs immediate veterinary attention." There was a pause on the other end. "White coat? Elena, there are no white wolves in Arizona. Are you sure it's not a dog? Maybe a husky or a Malamute someone dumped?" Elena looked at the animal before her. Even weakened and battered, there was no mistaking what it was. The long legs, the broad head, the massive paws. This was Canis lupus, no question. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Pat. It's a wolf." Another pause, longer this time. Eleanor could practically hear her supervisor's mind working through the implications. "All right, don't move. I'm dispatching Dr. Khalid from the Tucson facility. He's about 90 minutes out. Keep the animal stable, hydrated, but don't transport it yourself. We need to document everything." "Understood." As Elena ended the call, Marcus looked up. "I've stabilized the leg as best I can with what we have. But Elena, look at this." He gently lifted the wolf's left foreleg, turning it so she could see. Beneath the matted fur, barely visible, was a faded marking. Not a natural pattern, but something else. A scar, thin and precise, forming what looked like numbers. "Is that a tattoo?" Elena knelt closer, her fingers hovering over the mark without touching. "Someone tagged this wolf?" "Not just tagged. Look at the style. This is old, maybe years old. And see here?" Marcus indicated the wolf's ear. There was a small notch, healed over long ago, the kind researchers sometimes used for individual identification. Elena's pulse quickened. This wolf was part of a study. Someone raised it, tracked it. The implications cascaded through her mind. Captive-bred wolves were sometimes used in reintroduction programs or scientific studies. But white wolves, that coloring was specific to Arctic subspecies, wolves adapted for tundra and ice, not desert heat. Why would anyone bring an Arctic wolf to the southwest? And why was it alone, starving and broken in the middle of nowhere? As twilight deepened into night, the desert temperature began its dramatic plunge. Elena retrieved emergency blankets from the jeep, while Marcus set up battery-powered lights. The wolf watched their movements, its eyes reflecting the artificial glow with an eerie green shimmer. When Elena carefully draped a thermal blanket over its body, the animal released a long, shuddering breath, almost like a sigh of relief. "You're safe now," Elena murmured, surprising herself with the emotion in her voice. She wasn't usually the sentimental type. Wildlife biology required a certain emotional distance, a scientific detachment. But something about this wolf's gaze, the intelligence and trust in those eyes, broke through her professional barriers. Marcus sat back on his heels, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cooling air. "You know what's strange? It's not just that it's white. Look at its behavior. Most wild wolves, even injured ones, would be terrified of humans. They'd try to escape or go defensive. This one..." He gestured at the animal, which was now watching them with what could only be described as calm awareness. "It's like it knows we're here to help." Elena had noticed the same thing. The wolf's body language spoke of exhaustion and pain, yes, but not fear, not of them anyway. Whatever this animal had been through, it had learned that humans could be allies, not enemies. The rumble of an approaching vehicle pulled her attention to the highway. Headlights cut through the darkness, not the sleek SUV she'd expected, but a heavy-duty veterinary mobile unit, white, with the Alliance's logo on the side. Dr. Rashid Khalid emerged before the vehicle had fully stopped, medical bag in one hand, portable X-ray equipment in the other. Rashid was in his mid-40s, a Lebanese immigrant who'd spent a decade treating exotic animals before joining the conservation world. His dark eyes swept over the scene, taking in Elena, Marcus, and finally the wolf. His expression shifted from professional assessment to open astonishment. "Ya Allah," he breathed, kneeling beside the animal. "Where did you find this?" "About 2 hours ago, 50 yards from the highway," Elena said. "It was barely conscious." Rashid's hands moved with expert gentleness, examining the wolf while speaking in a low, melodic stream of Arabic mixed with English. The wolf remained still, allowing the examination. When Rashid checked its teeth, Elena heard him inhale sharply. "This wolf is approximately 6 years old, well past juvenile stages. The dental wear is consistent with a varied diet, not just wild game. See these molars? They've processed dried food at some point. This animal spent time in captivity. We found a tattoo." Marcus pointed out the faded numbers. Rashid pulled out a magnifying lens, studying the marking under his pen light. T237. "This is definitely a research tag, but I don't recognize the format." He pulled out his phone, snapping several photos. "I'll run it through the database. Someone, somewhere, has records on this wolf." As Rashid set up an IV line to deliver fluids and antibiotics, Elena stepped back and looked out at the dark desert. The temperature had dropped to the low 70s, almost pleasant now. A coyote yipped in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of creosote bush and dry earth. Why had this wolf come here? The question haunted her. Animals didn't make cross-country journeys without reason. Migration, territory disputes, searching for food or mates, those were the usual motivations. But this wolf had traveled through one of the most inhospitable environments in North America, sustaining terrible injuries in the process, to end up on this particular stretch of highway where 2 biologists happened to be passing by. "Elena," Rashid's voice cut through her thoughts. "I need to transport it to the facility. The leg requires surgery, and I want to run a full panel. Blood work, disease screening, the works. But I need you to make a decision." She turned back. "What kind of decision?" "Legally, if this wolf is part of an active research program, we may need permission from the original organization before proceeding with invasive treatment. That could take days, maybe weeks, or..." He paused, his expression grave. We treat now and handle the bureaucracy later. But if we're wrong, if this animal turns out to be someone's valuable research subject, there could be consequences. Elena looked at the wolf. Its eyes were closed now, the IV fluids already bringing a faint color back to its gums. It looked peaceful, trusting. In her 15 years of fieldwork, Elena had learned to trust her instincts. And every instinct screamed that this animal needed help now, not after forms were filed and permissions granted. "Save its life," she said firmly. "I'll handle the fallout." Rashid nodded, a slight smile crossing his face. "I was hoping you'd say that." Together, the three of them carefully loaded the wolf onto a stretcher and into the climate-controlled back of the mobile unit. As Rashid prepared to leave, he paused at the driver's door. "This is going to make waves, Elena. A white wolf in Arizona. The media will go crazy. And if someone was tracking this animal, they're going to come looking for it." "Let them come," Elena said. "Right now, all that matters is giving this wolf a fighting chance." As the mobile unit's taillights disappeared down the highway, Marcus stood beside Elena in the sudden quiet. The desert night stretched around them, vast and ancient. "You know," Marcus said softly, "in all our years of fieldwork, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen." Elena nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that strange was only the beginning. As they climbed back into the Jeep and headed toward Tucson, she kept seeing those amber eyes in her mind, intelligent, pleading, grateful. Somewhere out there was the answer to where this white wolf had come from. And Elena had the growing certainty that when they found that answer, everything would change. The Southwest Conservation Alliance facility in Tucson was quiet at 3 in the morning, its hallways lit only by emergency lighting and the soft glow from the surgical suite. Elena sat in the observation room, her third cup of coffee growing cold in her hands, watching through the glass as Dr. Khalid worked on the wolf's shattered leg. Marcus had gone home hours ago, promising to return at dawn. Patricia Reeves had made the 2-hour drive from Phoenix, her presence a silent statement of how significant this situation had become. She stood beside Elena now, arms crossed, her steel-grey hair pulled back in its usual tight bun. "Any word on the tattoo?" Elena asked without taking her eyes off the surgery. "Nothing yet. I've sent the ID number to every wildlife agency, research institution, and conservation program in North America. If someone tagged this animal, we'll find out." Pat's voice carried a note of frustration. "But Elena, I need you to prepare yourself. If this wolf belongs to a private facility or a military research program, we may have to surrender it." Elena's jaw tightened. "Not until it's healthy enough to travel." "Of course not." "But—" Pat's phone buzzed, cutting her off. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted from irritation to shock. "It's the National Wildlife Forensics Laboratory in Oregon. They're calling at 3 a.m. "That's never good," she answered on speaker. "Dr. Reeves." The voice on the other end was male, middle-aged, with a faint Canadian accent. "Dr. Reeves, this is Dr. Malcolm Frost from the NWFL. I understand you have a white wolf with identification number T237 in your facility." "We do. Can you tell us where it came from?" There was a long pause. In the background, Elena could hear papers rustling and what sounded like urgent conversation. "Dr. Reeves, I need to be very clear about something. What I'm about to tell you is not public information, and it involves ongoing federal investigations. T237 was part of a captive breeding and behavioral study conducted by the Northern Territory's Wolf Research Initiative in Alaska. The program was shut down 8 months ago, following allegations of misconduct." Elena leaned forward. "What kind of misconduct?" "The kind that ends careers and launches criminal investigations." "Doctor." Frost's voice was grim. "The facility was studying wolf social dynamics, specifically pack hierarchy and survival behavior under extreme conditions. But according to whistleblowers, the lead researcher, Dr. Vincent Hartley, began conducting unauthorized experiments, isolation trials, stress testing, things that crossed every ethical line we have." Pat's face had gone pale. And T-237 was one of 12 wolves in the program. When the facility was raided, federal agents found only 6 animals. The others, including T-237, had vanished. Hartley claimed they'd been transferred to other facilities, but no records existed. We've been looking for those wolves for 8 months. Another pause. Dr. Reeves, how did a wolf from Alaska end up in the Arizona desert? It was Elena who answered, her voice tight with anger. It traveled. God knows how far or how long. But it traveled. And from the condition we found it in, I'd say it was running from something. Or someone, Doctor. Frost added quietly, Dr. Hartley disappeared 3 weeks after the facility was shut down. His last known location was northern New Mexico near the Jicarilla Apache Reservation. That's about 400 miles north of where we found the wolf, Elena finished. Her mind was racing, piecing together a terrible picture. Dr. Frost, what exactly was Hartley studying? The silence stretched so long Elena thought the connection had dropped. Then, survival under duress. Specifically, how wolves navigate hostile territory when separated from their pack. He was releasing them into environments they weren't adapted for and tracking their movements. Elena felt sick. She looked through the glass at the wolf on the surgery table, its white fur stark under the bright lights, and suddenly understood. This wasn't an accidental journey. This was an experiment. Hartley had taken an Arctic wolf, an animal evolved for frozen tundra, and released it into the Sonoran Desert to see if it would survive. That's torture, Pat said, her voice shaking with fury. That's not research, it's sadism. We're aware, Dr. Frost replied, and we're building a case. But right now I need to know, is T-237 going to survive? Elena looked at Rashid, who was carefully plating the wolf's fractured femur. Ask me in the morning. After the call ended, Elena and Pat sat in heavy silence. The full weight of what they'd learned settled over them like a suffocating blanket. This wolf had endured months of deliberate cruelty, had been dumped in one of the harshest environments on Earth as a test subject, and had somehow found the strength and intelligence to seek help. Elena. Pat's voice was soft now, almost gentle. I need you to understand what this means. If Hartley is still out there, if he's still conducting these experiments, T-237 might not be the only wolf in danger. Then we find the others, Elena said immediately. We find them before he does something worse. The surgery lasted another 90 minutes. When Rashid finally emerged, pulling off his surgical mask, his face was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes were bright. The leg is repaired. Barring infection, it should heal well, though there may be a permanent limp. But that's not what concerns me. He gestured for them to follow him to his office. On his computer screen were X-rays and scan results. Rashid pointed to one image. Look at the ribs. See these healed fractures. 3 ribs, broken at different times over the past year. And here, he switched to another scan. The left shoulder shows evidence of a dislocation that healed incorrectly. This wolf has sustained repeated trauma. Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. Every new piece of information made the picture clearer and more horrifying. There's more. Rashid pulled up a chart. The blood work shows elevated cortisol levels, consistent with chronic stress. The kind of stress you see in animals that have been in prolonged, severe distress. But here's what's remarkable. He looked at them with something like awe. Despite everything this animal has been through, its will to survive is extraordinary. The physical damage should have killed it weeks ago. Somehow, it kept going. It was looking for help, Elena said. It remembered that humans could help it, even after what Hartley did. Rashid nodded slowly. That level of trust, after that level of trauma, it's almost unheard of. This wolf has an exceptional spirit. As dawn broke over Tucson, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Elena stood in the recovery room where the wolf lay sedated. Its chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, the IV still delivering fluids and pain medication. Someone had cleaned its fur, and even in the harsh fluorescent light, its white coat seemed to shimmer. Eleanor pulled up a chair and sat beside the recovery crate. Through the bars, she could see the wolf's face, peaceful now in drug-induced sleep. The anger that had been burning in her chest since Dr. Frost's call began to transform into something else. Determination. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said quietly, "but I'm going to make you a promise. We're going to find out what happened to the other wolves. We're going to make sure Hartley never hurts another animal. And we're going to give you the life you should have had from the beginning." The wolf's ear twitched, though its eyes remained closed. Marcus arrived just after 6, carrying breakfast burritos and looking considerably more rested. When Elena filled him in on the night's revelations, the color drained from his face. 400 miles, he said, shaking his head. Through mountains, highways, probably encountered people, predators, vehicles. How did it even know which direction to go? "I don't know," Elena admitted. "But it did. Somehow it navigated all of that to find help." "Not just help," Pat interjected, entering the room with her laptop. "I've been mapping Hartley's last known movements against T-237's probable route. The wolf didn't just wander south. It followed a path that would have taken it past 3 different wildlife rehabilitation centers, 2 veterinary schools, and multiple ranger stations. It was looking for someone specific." Eleanor frowned. "What do you mean?" Pat turned her laptop so they could see. On the screen was a map with 2 overlaid routes, one red, one blue. The red line is Hartley's known movements after the Alaska facility shut down. The blue line is the estimated path T-237 would have taken, based on where you found it. They intersect here, in northern New Mexico, about 3 weeks ago. Marcus leaned in. "You think Hartley released the wolf near there?" "I think he dumped it there to die," Pat said bluntly. "But the wolf didn't die. It kept moving south, and look where it ended up." She zoomed in on the map. "Highway 86, at the exact time you 2 would be driving past. A route you take every time you return from pronghorn surveys. A route you've taken for 3 years. Elena's blood ran cold. "That's not possible. How could it know?" "I don't think it knew," Pat said. "But I think someone wanted it to have a chance. Look at this." She pulled up another document. Before Hartley disappeared, he had a research assistant named Dr. Sarah Whitmore. She was one of the whistleblowers who exposed the program. And according to her testimony, she worked directly with T-237, training it for field studies. "You think she helped it escape?" Marcus asked. "I think she gave it a fighting chance," Pat replied. "And maybe, just maybe, she pointed it in a direction where it might find help." Eleanor looked back through the window at the sleeping wolf. A fighting chance. That's all any creature needed. Just one chance to survive, to be seen, to be saved. "We need to talk to Dr. Whitmore," Eleanor said. Pat nodded. "I've already made contact. She's willing to speak with us, but not over the phone. She's terrified Hartley will find out." She paused. "She's in Santa Fe. We can drive up tomorrow." As the 3 of them began planning the next steps, the wolf stirred in its crate. Its eyes opened slowly, still clouded with sedation, but aware. When it saw Elena through the bars, something shifted in its expression. Recognition, perhaps, or gratitude. Elena pressed her hand against the crate. The wolf's eyes tracked the movement, and then, with visible effort, it lifted one paw and pressed it against the bars from the inside, matching her hand's position. In that moment, Elena understood. This wasn't just about saving one wolf anymore. This was about uncovering a conspiracy, finding the missing animals, and stopping a man who saw living creatures as nothing more than data points in a cruel experiment. The miracle wasn't that they'd found the wolf. The miracle was that the wolf had found them and trusted them enough to ask for help. Now it was their turn to prove that trust wasn't misplaced. The drive to Santa Fe took 6 hours through landscapes that shifted from desert basins to high pine forests. Elena drove, while Marcus worked his laptop, compiling everything they knew about the Northern Territory's Wolf Research Initiative. Pat had stayed behind to coordinate with federal investigators and monitor the wolf's recovery, which Rashid reported was progressing better than expected. "Listen to this," Marcus said, scrolling through archived news articles. The facility was funded by a combination of private grants and Department of Defense contracts. DoD contracts, Elena. Why would the military be funding wolf behavior research? Elena's eyes stayed on the winding mountain road, but her mind was racing. Navigation, survival training. The military has studied animal behavior before, dolphins, sea lions, even bees. But wolves? Marcus shook his head. It doesn't make sense unless... He trailed off, typing furiously. Oh my God. What? Hartley published a paper 5 years ago titled Adaptive Navigation in Hostile Environments. Lessons from Canis lupus. It's about how wolves use terrain memory, scent marking, and even celestial navigation to traverse unfamiliar territory. He looked up at Elena. He was studying how to teach navigation in extreme conditions. The military would pay millions for that kind of research. And then he went rogue, Elena said quietly. Started pushing boundaries, testing limits, using living animals as expendable test subjects. They met Dr. Sarah Whitmore at a coffee shop in the historic plaza, a quiet place with adobe walls and the scent of roasting beans. She was younger than Elena expected, maybe 35, with auburn hair pulled into a practical ponytail and dark circles under her green eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept well in months. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. "Thank you for coming. When I heard you'd found Ghost, She stopped, emotion choking her voice. "I didn't think she'd make it." "Ghost?" Eleanor asked gently. Sarah nodded. "That's what I called her. T-237 was her official designation, but she deserved a real name. She was special, even among the other wolves. Intelligent, adaptable, and despite everything Hartley put her through, she never lost her capacity for trust." Marcus pulled out his tablet, ready to take notes. "Dr. Whitmore, we need to understand what happened at the facility. Everything." Sarah took a shaky breath and began. "I joined the program 3 years ago, fresh out of my doctorate. It seemed like a dream, studying wolf cognition and behavior with proper funding and resources. At first, everything was legitimate. We had 12 wolves, all captive bred from Arctic stock, and we were documenting their problem-solving abilities, pack dynamics, social learning." She paused, staring into her coffee. "Vincent, Dr. Hartley, was brilliant, charismatic. He made you believe you were part of something revolutionary. But about 18 months ago, things changed. He became obsessed with what he called extreme adaptive capacity. He started designing scenarios that went beyond observation. He wanted to see how far he could push them." "What kind of scenarios?" Elena asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "Isolation first. He'd separate wolves from their packmates for weeks, monitoring their stress responses, then environmental challenges, extreme temperatures, limited food, obstacles they had to overcome. Ghost was his favorite subject because she was so resilient. No matter what he threw at her, she found a way through." Sarah's voice hardened. He saw that as permission to go further. Marcus's jaw was tight. "And no one stopped him?" "The facility was remote, in the backcountry near Denali. We were a small team, and Hartley controlled everything. The funding, the research direction, contact with the outside world. By the time I realized how far he'd gone, I was complicit. We all were." And my tears welled in her eyes. I should have spoken up sooner. Elena reached across the table, placing her hand over Sarah's. "You're speaking up now. That's what matters. Tell us about the missing wolves." Sarah wiped her eyes and straightened, some steel returning to her voice. "When the federal investigation started, Hartley panicked. He had data he couldn't explain, records of procedures that would end his career and possibly land him in prison. So he made 6 wolves disappear from the records, claiming they'd died or been transferred. But I knew the truth. He was planning something. What? Marcus leaned forward. One final experiment, the culmination of all his research. He called it the dispersal study. He wanted to see if wolves could navigate back to a designated safe point from hundreds of miles away, across terrain they'd never encountered, without any pack support. Sarah's expression was haunted. He was going to release them in remote locations across the southwest and track their movements. The ones that survived would prove his theories. The ones that didn't, she shrugged bitterly. Acceptable losses in his mind. Eleanor felt rage building in her chest. He's using living animals in a survival experiment with no safety measures, no ethical oversight, no intention of rescue, Sarah interrupted. That's the worst part. Even if they made it to the designated coordinates, he wasn't planning to retrieve them. He just wanted the data. But you had other plans, Marcus said, understanding dawning in his eyes. Sarah nodded. I couldn't stop him from taking the wolves. He had supporters, people who believed in his vision, who helped him move the animals before the feds could seize them. But I managed to access his tracking system. I knew where he was planning to release each wolf, and I knew Ghost was going to Arizona. She pulled out her own phone, showing them a map. I'd worked with Ghost for 2 years. I'd trained her, studied her, bonded with her. So I made a modification to her tracking collar before Hartley took her. What kind of modification? Eleanor asked. A homing signal. Not to Hartley's coordinates, but to a route I knew was regularly traveled by conservation biologists. Your route. Sarah looked directly at Elena. I'd read your papers on pronghorn conservation, seen the field reports your organization published. I knew you ran surveys every spring along Highway 86. I programmed Ghost's collar to emit a signal that would draw her toward that highway during the time frame you'd be there. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it worked, Eleanor breathed. She found us because you led her to us. I gave her a chance, Sarah said. That's all I could do. Everything else, the journey, the survival, the choice to seek help, that was all Ghost. She's extraordinary, Dr. Vargas, and she deserves justice. Marcus was typing rapidly. How many wolves did Hartley take? Where are the others? Sarah pulled up a file on her phone, transferring it to Marcus's tablet. 6 wolves total, including Ghost. I managed to copy Hartley's release coordinates before my access was revoked. 2 were released in western Texas near Big Bend, 1 in southern Colorado, 1 in northern Nevada, and 1, her voice dropped, 1 somewhere in the Mojave Desert east of Death Valley. When? Elena demanded. Ghost was released 8 months ago. The others? Sarah checked her notes. The Texas pair was released 6 months ago. Colorado 5 months ago. Nevada 4 months ago. Mojave. She looked up, her face pale. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. If Ghost had barely survived 8 months, what chance did the most recent wolf have? Elena was already standing. We need to find them, now. Elena, wait! Marcus grabbed her arm. We can't just rush out there. We need resources, authorization, a coordinated search. We need to save them before they die, Elena shot back. Every day we spend planning is another day those wolves are suffering. Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went white. Oh, God. What? Elena and Marcus asked in unison. It's an alert from the modified tracking system I set up. I've been monitoring it remotely, hoping to catch signals from the other wolves' collars. Her hands shook as she showed them the screen. One of the Texas wolves just went stationary. Its vitals are dropping. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm. Elena's mind shifted into crisis mode. Can you pinpoint the location? Within a mile, yes. Sarah was already working her phone. It's near Terlingua in the Chihuahuan Desert, about 9 hours from here. Elena looked at Marcus. They'd been partners long enough that no words were needed. He nodded. Call Pat, Elena said, grabbing her keys. Tell her we need emergency authorization for field rescue, medical supplies, and backup. Sarah, you're coming with us. We'll need your knowledge of the wolves' training. I don't have authorization to... Sarah began. You're a consulting expert as of right now, Elena interrupted. We'll handle the paperwork later. Right now, we have a wolf to save. Did I? As they rushed to the jeep, Sarah caught Elena's arm. Dr. Vargas, you need to understand something. Hartley designed these releases to test survival under maximum stress. The locations aren't random. They're deliberately chosen to be as hostile as possible. And he's watching. All the wolves have tracking collars, and he has access to the data. Meaning what? Meaning if we go after these wolves, if we start interfering with his experiment, he'll know. And he won't let his research be compromised. Sarah's eyes were deadly serious. Hartley isn't just unethical, he's obsessed, and obsessed people are dangerous. Eleanor thought of Ghost, lying in her recovery crate in Tucson, her white fur clean and her broken leg mended. She thought of 5 other wolves, scattered across the Southwest, fighting for survival in environments designed to kill them. Let him come, Elena said. We're not leaving them out there. The drive back through Santa Fe's winding streets felt surreal. They'd come looking for answers and found a conspiracy, a mission, and a ticking clock. As Marcus coordinated with Pat over speakerphone and Sarah pulled up satellite maps of Terlingua, Elena gripped the steering wheel and pushed the jeep toward the highway. 9 hours to Texas. 9 hours to find a wolf that might already be dead. But they had to try. Ghost had survived her ordeal by trusting that help existed somewhere in the vast, hostile world. Now it was time to prove that trust wasn't misplaced, not just for her, but for all the others still fighting to stay alive. The miracle had started when they found Ghost, but it wouldn't end until every wolf was safe. Behind them, Santa Fe disappeared into the mountains. Ahead lay the desert, the darkness, and 5 wolves who had no idea that rescue was finally coming. The sun was setting over the Chihuahuan desert when they crossed into Texas. 9 hours of relentless driving, punctuated only by brief stops for gas and hurried phone calls. Elena's eyes burned with fatigue. Her hands ached from gripping the wheel, but she pushed the jeep harder. Beside her, Marcus monitored Sarah's tracking system, while Sarah herself sat in the back, reviewing everything she knew about the wolf they were racing to save. ID number T229 male called him Smoke because of his grey markings, Sarah said, her voice hoarse. 5 years old, smaller than Ghost, but incredibly determined. He was part of a bonded pair with T241, a female we called Shadow. Hartley separated them for the Texas release. He released them separately. Marcus's voice was sharp with anger. Wolves are pack animals. Separating bonded pairs is cruel, Sarah finished. Yes, that was the point. He wanted to see if social bonds would drive them to reunite, or if survival instinct would override pack loyalty. Eleanor's jaw clenched. Every new detail about Hartley's methodology made her want to find the man, and she forced the thought away. Right now, Smoke needed them. The last light was fading when they reached Terlingua, a ghost town turned artistic community near Big Bend National Park. Sarah's tracker led them onto a dirt road that wound through creosote flats and limestone outcroppings. The signal was close now, less than a mile ahead. Vitals are still dropping, Marcus reported, his voice tense. Heart rate is 42 beats per minute. That's dangerously low. Elena killed the headlights as they approached the coordinates, navigating by moonlight. They discussed strategy during the drive. Approach quietly, assess the situation, extract the wolf as quickly and safely as possible. Pat had arranged for a local veterinarian to meet them at a clinic in Alpine, 40 miles north. But first, they had to find Smoke. The jeep rolled to a stop near a shallow arroyo. In the silvery moonlight, the desert looked almost peaceful. But Elena knew better. Summer nights in the Chihuahuan could still reach 90 degrees, and water was scarce. For an Arctic wolf, even nighttime offered little relief. They gathered their equipment: medical kit, thermal blanket, water, stretcher, and tranquilizer gun, just in case. Sarah carried a small speaker that could emit wolf vocalizations, hoping Smoke might respond to recorded pack calls. "The signal is coming from those rocks," Sarah whispered, pointing to an outcropping about 200 yards away. They approached on foot, moving as quietly as possible. Elena led with a flashlight set to red light, less likely to startle wildlife. The desert night was alive with sounds: crickets, a distant coyote, the rustle of something small fleeing their approach. Then they saw him. Smoke was wedged into a narrow crevice between two boulders, his grey and white coat barely visible in the shadows. Unlike Ghost, who had been lying in open ground, this wolf had sought shelter, a last-ditch effort to escape the heat and hide from predators. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and rapid. "He's in shock," Marcus breathed, dropping to his knees a safe distance away. "Severe dehydration, probably organ failure starting. We need to move fast." But as Elena stepped closer, Smoke's eyes snapped open. Despite his weakened state, a low growl rumbled from his chest, his lips pulled back, revealing teeth. Unlike Ghost, Smoke hadn't been programmed to seek help. He'd been driven to this point by desperation, and his instinct now was defensive. "Easy, boy," Sarah said softly, activating the speaker. A gentle wolf whine emanated from it, a non-threatening sound. "It's okay, we're here to help." Smoke's ears twitched, but the growl didn't stop. His body was wedged so tightly into the crevice that extracting him would require careful maneuvering. One wrong move, and he might injure himself further. Or them. Elena made a decision. "Sarah, keep talking to him. Marcus, prepare a tranquilizer. Light dose. He's already weak. Elena, if we trank him in this position, he could aspirate," Marcus began. "If we don't, he'll fight us and waste what little energy he has left," Elena interrupted. "We don't have a choice." The tranquilizer dart hit Smoke in the shoulder with a soft thump. The wolf jerked, trying to lunge, but the crevice held him in place. Within 30 seconds, his movement slowed. Within a minute, his head lowered. "Now," Elena commanded. Working together, they carefully extracted Smoke from the rocks. He was shockingly light, his body wasted by months of starvation and dehydration. Marcus immediately started an IV while Sarah wrapped him in thermal blankets. Elena checked his vitals. Heart rate still dangerously low, breathing labored, core temperature elevated despite the cooling night. "We need to get him to Alpine now," Marcus said urgently. They loaded Smoke onto the stretcher and hurried back to the jeep. As Marcus climbed into the back to monitor the wolf during transport, Sarah suddenly grabbed Elena's arm. "Wait, look." In the distance, perhaps half a mile away, headlights cut through the darkness. A vehicle was approaching on the same dirt road they'd taken. "Could be tourists," Elena said, but her instinct screamed otherwise. "Or it could be Hartley," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. "He's monitoring the collars. He'd know we're here." Elena made a split-second decision. "Marcus, you and Sarah take Smoke to Alpine. I'll handle whoever's coming." "Elena, no," Marcus started. "That's an order." Elena's voice left no room for argument. "Save the wolf. I'll be right behind you." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. The jeep roared to life and took off across the desert, its taillights disappearing into the darkness. Elena stood alone on the dirt road watching the approaching vehicle. She pulled out her phone and quickly texted Pat. "Possible contact with Hartley. Send backup to Terlingua coordinates." The vehicle, a dust-covered Land Rover, stopped 50 feet away. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. The man who emerged was tall and lean, probably in his late 50s, with silver hair and sharp features. He wore field clothes, cargo pants, hiking boots, a vest with multiple pockets, but it was his eyes that struck Elena. Cold, calculating, utterly without warmth. "Dr. Vargas, I presume," he said. His voice was cultured, almost pleasant. "I'm Dr. Vincent Hartley." Eleanor's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Your experiment is over, Dr. Hartley. We're recovering your wolves." Hartley smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Recovering? Is that what you call interference with a sanctioned research project?" "Sanctioned?" Elena felt her anger rising. "Your project was shut down. Your credentials were revoked. What you're doing is animal cruelty, and it's going to land you in prison. On the contrary, what I'm doing is revolutionary science. Do you have any idea what these wolves have proven? Navigation capabilities beyond anything we thought possible. Survival instincts that could reshape our understanding of adaptive behavior. He took a step closer. T2229 was making remarkable progress. His stress responses were generating data that could... He was dying. Elena cut him off. Your remarkable progress was killing him. Unfortunate, but within acceptable parameters. Not every subject survives. That's the nature of field research. They're not subjects, Elena said, her voice shaking with rage. They're living beings. They feel pain, fear, suffering. And you tortured them for data. Hartley's pleasant expression finally cracked, revealing the obsession beneath. You can't possibly understand the importance of this work. The military, search and rescue disaster response. The applications are limitless. Sacrificing a few wolves to save thousands of human lives is not just justified, it's necessary. There's nothing necessary about cruelty. Elena stood her ground. And I'm not letting you near those wolves again. Hartley reached into his vest. Elena tensed, but he only pulled out a tablet. Each wolf has a tracking collar with a remote deactivation feature. The collars are the only way to monitor their vitals, their locations. If you interfere further, I'll deactivate them all. You'll never find the remaining wolves. It was a bluff. It had to be. But the cold certainty in Hartley's eyes made Elena hesitate. You'd let them die just to protect your research? I'd let them complete their purpose. That's what they were bred for. He held up the tablet. Call off your team. Return T229. Or I press this button and the other 3 wolves disappear into the desert forever. Elena's mind raced. 3 wolves still out there. The Colorado wolf, the Nevada wolf, and the one in the Mojave. If Hartley deactivated their collars, finding them would be nearly impossible. But if she gave in, Smoke would die, and Hartley would continue his experiments. Behind her, she heard the distant sound of engines, Pat's backup, finally arriving. Hartley heard it too. His expression hardened. Last chance, Dr. Vargas. No, Elena said quietly. Last chance for you. Surrender now and maybe the court will show mercy. Mercy? Hartley laughed bitterly. Mercy is for the weak. His finger moved toward the tablet. Elena didn't think. She lunged forward, knocking the tablet from Hartley's hands. It skittered across the dirt as they both dove for it. Hartley was faster, grabbing it and rolling away, but Elena caught his ankle. He kicked, catching her in the ribs, but she held on. Vehicle doors slammed, voices shouted, flashlights swept across them. Federal agents in tactical gear materialized from the darkness, weapons drawn. Dr. Hartley, on the ground, now! Hartley froze, the tablet in his hand. For a moment, Eleanor thought he might actually press the button, might condemn 3 wolves to death out of spite. Then his shoulders sagged, and he lowered the device. It's over, Eleanor said, gasping for breath. As federal agents cuffed Hartley and led him away, one of them, a woman with FBI credentials, handed Elena the tablet. Dr. Vargas, we'll need this as evidence, but first, can you use it to locate the other wolves? Elena's hands shook as she opened the tracking interface. 3 signals glowed on the screen. Colorado, Nevada, Mojave. All still active. All still transmitting vitals. Yes, she said, relief flooding through her. We can find them. Her phone rang. Marcus. Elena, we're at the clinic. Smoke is stable. The vet says with treatment, he's going to make it. Elena closed her eyes, feeling tears of exhaustion and relief slide down her cheeks. Good. That's good, Marcus. I'm coming. She ended the call and looked at the FBI agent. There are 3 more wolves out there. We need to find them before it's too late. The agent nodded. We'll coordinate with your organization. Dr. Hartley isn't going anywhere, and his research is now federal evidence. Those wolves are your priority. As the federal vehicles left with Hartley in custody, Elena stood alone in the desert night once more. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But there was no time to rest. 3 wolves remained scattered across hundreds of miles of hostile terrain, and now they had the means to find them. She climbed into Pat's backup vehicle, a Conservation Department SUV that had arrived with the agents. The driver, a young ranger named Tom, looked at her expectantly. "Where to, Doctor?" "Of Vargas." Eleanor pulled up the tablet, studying the 3 signals. The Colorado Wolf was in the San Luis Valley, vital, stable, but weak. Nevada was near Pyramid Lake, vitals concerning. But the Mojave signal made her blood run cold. The Wolf was in Death Valley, the hottest place in North America, and its heart rate was erratic. "Death Valley," she said. "The Mojave Wolf has been out there alone for 3 weeks. If we don't reach it soon—" She didn't need to finish. Tom nodded and gunned the engine. As they raced through the Texas night toward Alpine to regroup with Marcus and Sarah, Elena allowed herself one moment of victory. They'd saved Ghost, they'd saved Smoke, they'd stopped Hartley. But the mission wasn't over. Not while 3 more wolves needed them. The miracle that had begun on a desert highway in Arizona was spreading, rippling outward like hope across the Southwest. And Elena would follow it as far as it led, because that's what you did when an animal looked at you with trust in its eyes. You didn't let them down. 2 hours later, they regrouped at the Alpine Clinic. Smoke was sleeping in a recovery crate, IV lines running into his front leg, his breathing finally steady and strong. Marcus looked exhausted but triumphant. Sarah stood over the wolf she'd called friend, tears streaming down her face. "He's going to make it," the veterinarian, Dr. Rodriguez, confirmed. "Another few hours and we would have lost him, but he's a fighter." Elena placed her hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You saved him. Without your tracking system, we never would have found him in time." Sarah wiped her eyes. "We saved him, and we're going to save the others too." Elena looked at her team, Marcus loyal and determined, Sarah brave and guilt-ridden but fighting for redemption, Pat coordinating resources from Tucson, and Rashid caring for Ghost hundreds of miles away. They were exhausted, running on fumes and determination, but they weren't done. "Nevada and Colorado will take coordinated teams," Elena said, pulling up the tablet. "But Death Valley, that one's critical. The wolf was released 3 weeks ago in peak summer heat. Even with survival training, the conditions are extreme." "Then we go to Death Valley," Marcus said simply. Elena nodded. "We leave at dawn. Tom will drive us to the nearest airfield. Pat's arranged a charter flight to Furnace Creek. From there, we track on foot." As plans came together, as phone calls were made and resources mobilized, Elena stepped outside into the cool Texas night. Above, stars blazed in infinite numbers, the Milky Way a river of light across the sky. Somewhere out there, 3 wolves were looking at those same stars, fighting to survive another night. "Hold on," Elena whispered to the darkness. "We're coming for you." Inside the clinic, Smoke's eyes opened briefly. He looked around at the strange room, the medical equipment, the humans who had pulled him from death's grip. Then his gaze found Sarah through the window, and something like recognition flickered in his amber eyes. He lowered his head back to the blanket and slept, truly slept, for the first time in months. Because somehow, despite everything Hartley had done to prove that survival was about competition and cruelty, these wolves had discovered a different truth. Sometimes the greatest act of survival was trusting someone to help you. And sometimes miracles came not from extraordinary circumstances, but from ordinary people who refused to look away when someone, human or animal, needed them most. The small plane touched down at Furnace Creek just after sunrise, landing on a strip of asphalt that shimmered even in the early morning heat. Elena, Marcus, and Sarah stepped out into air that felt like opening an oven door. The thermometer at the airfield read 98 degrees, and it was only 7 a.m. "The forecast is calling for 120 today," the pilot said grimly. "You folks be careful out there." They loaded into a Park Service vehicle driven by a ranger named Miguel Santos, who'd volunteered to help with the search. Miguel had worked Death Valley for 15 years and knew its dangers intimately. "No animal should be out here in summer," Miguel said as they drove deeper into the valley. "This place kills things. That's just what it does." Eleanor studied the tablet. The signal was coming from near Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America, where summer ground temperatures could exceed 200 degrees. How far? About 40 minutes. But Dr. Vargas, even with the coordinates, finding one wolf in Death Valley is like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach. This place is vast, and if the animal's taken shelter... He shook his head. Sarah leaned forward from the back seat. "This wolf is T198, female. We called her Ash because of her silver-grey coat. She was the youngest in the program, only 4 years old, but incredibly intelligent. If anyone could survive this place, it's her." "Surviving and thriving are different things," Marcus said, monitoring the vitals on the tablet. "Her heart rate is elevated. Body temperature is critical. She's in severe heat stress." They parked at the edge of a salt flat that stretched toward infinity, a white expanse broken by polygonal patterns of crystallized minerals. In the distance, mountains wavered in the heat shimmer. The landscape was beautiful in an alien, hostile way, utterly devoid of shelter or water. "The signal's coming from there," Elena pointed to a cluster of rocks about a mile across the flats. "We walk from here," Miguel said, distributing water bottles and sun protection. "Stay together. Drink constantly, and if anyone feels dizzy or nauseous, we turn back immediately. Heat stroke can kill in minutes out here." The walk across the salt flat was surreal. The ground crunched under their boots, and the reflected heat created the sensation of being cooked from below and above simultaneously. Elena's lungs burned with each breath of superheated air. Sweat evaporated before it could cool her skin. Halfway across, Marcus stumbled. Sarah caught his arm. "You okay?" "Yeah, just..." He drank deeply from his water bottle. How could anything survive this? That was the question that haunted Elena with every step. Ash had been out here for 3 weeks, an Arctic wolf in Death Valley in summer. It shouldn't have been possible. They reached the rocks, a small outcropping that offered minimal shade. The tablet indicated Ash was within 50 feet. But they saw nothing. "Spread out," Elena commanded. "Look for caves, crevices, anywhere she might have taken shelter." It was Sarah who found her. "Here, she's here." Eleanor and Marcus rushed over. Ash had wedged herself deep into a narrow fissure in the rock, so far back that only her eyes were visible, 2 points of gold gleaming in the darkness. Unlike Smoke, she didn't growl. Unlike Ghost, she didn't reach out for help. She simply watched, too exhausted even for fear. "Ash," Sarah said softly, tears already flowing. "Sweet girl, we've got you." But extracting her proved nearly impossible. The fissure was barely wide enough for a human arm, and Ash had pressed herself as far back as physics allowed. She was conscious but unresponsive, her body in full shutdown mode. "We have to widen the opening," Miguel said, examining the rock. "If we can remove a few of these stones..." "There's no time," Marcus interrupted, looking at the tablet. "Her vitals are crashing. We need to get her out now and into cooling treatment immediately." Elena made a decision she'd never forgive herself for if it went wrong. "I'm going in." "Elena, you can't fit," Marcus began. "I'm smaller than any of you. I can reach her." Elena was already stripping off her pack and equipment belt. "Marcus, give me the sedative and the portable IV. Sarah, have the cooling blankets ready the second we pull her out." The fissure was tight, scraping Elena's shoulders as she squeezed through. The rock was hot enough to burn exposed skin. She pushed deeper, her headlamp illuminating the narrow space. Finally, her hands found fur. Ash jerked at the contact, but didn't have the strength to pull away. Eleanor's fingers found the wolf's neck, feeling the rapid, thready pulse. "I've got you," she whispered. "I promise. I've got you." She administered the sedative by feel, waiting for Ash's body to relax. Then, carefully, she began to back out, pulling the wolf with her. It was agonizing work. Every inch had to be fought for, the wolf's weight dragging against Elena's exhausted muscles. Hands grabbed her ankles, helping pull. The fissure scraped her back, her arms, her face. And then suddenly they were out, collapsing onto the burning salt flat with ash between them. The wolf was skeletal, her beautiful coat matted and dull. Marcus immediately started the IV, while Sarah wrapped her in cooling blankets soaked with precious water. Miguel was on his radio, calling for emergency extraction. "There's a helicopter en route from Las Vegas," he reported. 20 minutes out. 20 minutes felt like hours. They created a makeshift shelter, using their bodies to shade ash from the murderous sun. They poured water over her, monitoring her vitals every 30 seconds. Her temperature was 108 degrees, dangerously high even with the cooling efforts. "Come on, Ash," Sarah pleaded, holding the wolf's head in her lap. "You survived 3 weeks in hell. Don't give up now." The sound of helicopter rotors was the most beautiful thing Elena had ever heard. The Medivac team worked with practiced efficiency, loading Ash into a specialized animal transport pod with climate control. Within minutes, they were airborne, racing toward a veterinary trauma center in Las Vegas. Elena, Marcus and Sarah made the slower journey by vehicle, none of them speaking. They were too exhausted, too emotionally wrung out. But as they drove out of Death Valley, Elena's phone began buzzing with messages. "Pat, Colorado team successful. Wolf recovered stable condition." "Pat, Nevada team reporting extraction complete. Wolf critical, but alive." "Pat, all 5 wolves accounted for and receiving treatment." Elena read the messages aloud, and Sarah broke down sobbing. Great, heaving sobs of relief and grief and exhaustion. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders, his own eyes wet. "We did it," he said hoarsely. "We actually did it." But it wasn't until they reached the Las Vegas facility 12 hours later that the full impact hit them. The veterinary center had converted an entire wing for the wolves. In separate climate-controlled rooms, 5 Arctic wolves were recovering from their ordeals. Ghost, her leg in a cast but her eyes bright and aware, perked up when Elena entered. The wolf's tail gave a weak wag. Smoke, still thin but no longer at death's door, was actually eating, his first full meal in months. The Colorado wolf, a large male named Frost, was sleeping peacefully, his breathing steady and strong. The Nevada wolf, a small female called Mist, had her head resting on a veterinary tech's lap, soaking up the gentle human contact. And Ash, beautiful, resilient Ash, was alive. Barely, but alive. Her vitals had stabilized during transport, and now she lay in a specially cooled room, IV lines running into both front legs, but her eyes were open and tracking movement. Dr. Rashid had flown in from Tucson to coordinate care. He found Elena standing in the observation hallway, looking through the windows at all 5 wolves. "They're going to make it," Rashid said quietly. "All of them. It's going to take months of rehabilitation, but they'll survive." Elena couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She'd spent 15 years in conservation work, had saved countless animals, but nothing had ever felt like this. These 5 wolves had been written off as acceptable losses, expendable test subjects in a madman's experiment, and now they were safe. "What happens to them now?" Marcus asked, joining them. "That's up to the Federal Wildlife Service," Rashid replied. "But given their backgrounds, captive-bred, habituated to human contact, they can't be released into the wild. They'll need permanent placement in sanctuaries." "I know a place," Sarah said, approaching with her phone. "The Northern Lights Wolf Sanctuary in Montana. They specialize in wolves that can't be rewilded. I spoke with the director. They have space for all 5, and they can keep them together if we want." Elena looked at Ghost through the window. The white wolf met her gaze, and something passed between them, understanding, gratitude, connection. "Together," Elena said. "They've been through hell alone. They deserve to be a pack." Over the next 3 days, as the wolves stabilized and began the long road to recovery, The story broke nationwide. News outlets picked up the tale of the rescued wolves, the cruel research program, Hartley's arrest. Public outrage was immediate and fierce. Elena found herself giving interview after interview, always bringing it back to the same point. These animals survived because they refused to give up hope. They taught us that even in the darkest circumstances, the will to live and the courage to ask for help can create miracles. Donations poured into the Northern Lights Sanctuary. Within a week, they'd raised enough money not just to care for the 5 rescued wolves, but to expand their facilities and take in other animals in need. On the 4th day, Dr. Patricia Reeves arrived with news. The Justice Department wants to meet with all of you. There are other research programs that may be crossing ethical lines. They want your help identifying them. Elena looked at Marcus and Sarah. They were exhausted, emotionally scarred by what they'd witnessed. But when she saw the determination in their eyes, she knew their answer before they spoke. "We'll help," Marcus said. "Whatever it takes," Sarah added. That evening, Elena returned to Ghost's room one final time before heading home to Tucson. The white wolf was standing now, tentatively putting weight on her healing leg. When Elena entered, Ghost limped over to the window that separated them and pressed her nose against the glass. Elena placed her palm against the window, matching where Ghost's nose touched. "You started all of this," she said softly. "You trusted us when you had every reason not to. You believed help existed somewhere in the world. And because of that, 5 wolves are alive, a monster is in jail, and maybe, just maybe, we've made the world a little bit better." Ghost's tail wagged slowly. Then she turned and limped back to her bed, settling down with a contented sigh. As Elena left the facility and stepped into the cool Nevada night, she felt something shift inside her. She'd spent her career studying animals from a distance, documenting their behaviors, writing papers about conservation. But this visceral, desperate fight to save individual lives had changed her. Marcus was waiting by the rental car, phone to his ear. When he saw Elena, he covered the receiver. "It's the sanctuary director. They want to know when we can transport the wolves. Weather's clearing in Montana. They're thinking next week." "Tell them we'll be ready," Elena said. As they drove toward the airport, Elena thought about miracles. People always imagined miracles as grand, supernatural events. But the real miracle wasn't that they'd found Ghost begging for help on a desert highway. The real miracle was what happened after. The choice to stop, to care, to fight for 5 lives that the world had already dismissed. The miracle was human compassion meeting animal courage. It was Sarah's guilt transforming into redemption. It was Marcus's steady loyalty. It was Pat's swift action. It was Rashid's gentle expertise. It was a pilot flying into Death Valley and rangers risking heat stroke and veterinarians working around the clock. The miracle was everyone who chose to help instead of looking away. And it wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. 6 weeks later, Elena stood in a meadow in northern Montana, watching 5 Arctic wolves explore their new home for the first time. The Northern Lights Wolf Sanctuary sprawled across 200 acres of forest and grassland, backed by snow-capped mountains that gleamed in the late summer sun. The enclosure, designed for ghost, smoke, ash, frost, and mist, was nearly 20 acres. Spacious enough to feel wild, secure enough to keep them safe. The transport had been carefully orchestrated. Each wolf had traveled in a climate-controlled crate, accompanied by veterinary staff. Elena, Marcus, and Sarah had driven the entire route, unwilling to let the wolves out of their sight even for a moment. Now, as the crate doors opened, Elena held her breath. Ghost emerged first, as she had emerged from everything, with cautious courage. Her white coat had regained its luster during weeks of proper nutrition and care. The cast was gone from her leg, though she walked with a slight limp that would likely remain forever. She stepped onto the grass, lifted her head and breathed deeply. Then she did something Elena had never seen from her before. She howled. It was a sound of pure, primal joy, a declaration that she had survived, that she was home, that the nightmare was finally over. One by one, the others joined her. Smoke bounded out, his grey coat glossy and healthy, and immediately began investigating every scent. Ash moved more cautiously, still recovering from her ordeal in Death Valley, but her amber eyes were bright with curiosity. Frost, the large Colorado male, stretched his powerful body and surveyed his territory with satisfaction. And Little Mist, the Nevada wolf, stayed close to the others, drawing comfort from the pack that had been denied to her for so long. Sanctuary Director James Whitfield stood beside Elena, watching with tears streaming down his weathered face. In 30 years of doing this work, I've never seen anything like it. 5 wolves who should have died, all thriving. It's extraordinary. They're extraordinary, Sarah said softly. She'd been offered a position at the sanctuary as lead behavioral specialist and had accepted immediately. This was her chance to make amends, to ensure these wolves lived the peaceful lives they'd been denied. As the afternoon wore on, something magical happened. The 5 wolves began to interact, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Smoke and Frost engaged in play-fighting, their bodies twisting and lunging in the dance of healthy wolves establishing hierarchy. Ghost found a sunny spot and lay down with a contented sigh. Ash and Mist groomed each other, rebuilding the social bonds that Hartley had tried to destroy. They were becoming a pack. Marcus snapped photos, documenting everything. "This is going in the research paper," he said. "The resilience of traumatized animals when given proper care and social support. It's groundbreaking." But Eleanor wasn't thinking about research papers. She was watching Ghost, remembering the moment on Highway 86 when their eyes had first met. A dying wolf and an exhausted biologist, connected by chance and desperation. Everything that followed, the surgeries, the rescue missions, the confrontation with Hartley, the national outcry, the legal battles, all of it had started with one choice: to stop and help. "Elena!" Pat's voice came from behind her. Elena's supervisor had flown in for the wolves' arrival, along with Dr. Rashid and a small delegation from the Southwest Conservation Alliance. "The board wants to create a new division, Rapid Response Rescue. They want you to lead it." Elena turned, surprised. "What? After what happened with the wolves, we've been flooded with reports of animals in crisis situations that fall through bureaucratic cracks. Animals that need immediate help, not forms and committees." Pat's expression was earnest. "You proved that sometimes the best conservation work happens in the field, in the moment, when someone cares enough to act. We want to formalize that." Marcus grinned. "I already signed on as your second in command. Someone has to keep you from getting killed." Elena looked back at the wolves. Ghost had stood and was walking toward the fence line, toward Elena. The white wolf stopped a few feet from the barrier and sat, her golden eyes steady and calm. "I'll do it," Elena said, "on one condition." "Name it," Pat replied. "Every animal we save gets treated like these 5, like individuals who matter, not just statistics or data points. No corners cut, no compromises." "Done." As the sun began to set, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson, the sanctuary staff prepared to leave the wolves to settle in. But Elena lingered, standing at the fence with Ghost on the other side. "You changed everything," Elena said quietly. "You and your courage. You trusted when you had every reason not to. And because of that, 5 lives were saved. A dangerous man was stopped, and maybe we'll save even more animals who need help." Ghost's tail wagged slowly. Then the white wolf stood, turned, and walked back to her pack, to Smoke and Ash and Frost and Mist, who were settling down together in the grass as twilight deepened. Sarah joined Elena at the fence. "She doesn't need us anymore," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That's how it should be. We gave them back what Hartley stole, their dignity, their peace, their pack." "What will you do here?" Eleanor asked. Sarah smiled, genuine warmth reaching her eyes for the first time in months. "I'll watch over them, document their recovery, make sure they never suffer again. It's not redemption. I can't undo what I was part of. But it's a start." "It's more than a start," Marcus said, joining them. "You risked everything to save them. You gave us the tools to find them. You're a hero, Sarah, whether you believe it or not." The three of them stood together as darkness fell, watching the wolves settle into sleep. Their breathing synchronized, their bodies pressed close in the way of pack animals who found safety after terror. 3 months later, Elena received a letter from a hiker in Oregon. He'd found an injured bobcat kitten and didn't know what to do. "I heard about what you did for those wolves," he wrote. "I thought maybe you could help." She could, and she did. A month after that, a rancher in New Mexico called about a starving mountain lion that had been poisoned by illegal traps. The rapid response team mobilized within hours. Then came a sea turtle caught in fishing nets off the California coast, an eagle with a broken wing in Utah, a family of foxes displaced by wildfire in Colorado. Each rescue built on the one before. Each life saved mattered. And always Elena thought of Ghost, the white wolf who had begged for help and received it, starting a ripple that spread farther than anyone could have imagined. The legal case against Dr. Vincent Hartley concluded in late autumn. He was convicted on multiple counts of animal cruelty, fraud, and violation of federal wildlife protection laws. The sentence: 12 years in federal prison and a lifetime ban from any work involving animals. Elena attended the sentencing. As Hartley was led away, he looked at her one final time. "They were just wolves," he said, as if he still couldn't understand why anyone cared. "No," Elena replied. "They were lives, and they mattered." On the 1-year anniversary of finding Ghost, Elena returned to Montana. The sanctuary had become a place of pilgrimage for people inspired by the wolves' story. Visitors came from around the world to see the animals who had survived the impossible. James met her at the entrance. "There's something you need to see." He led her to the observation platform overlooking the wolves' enclosure. All 5 were there, healthy and strong. But there was something new, a structure made of logs and branches, a communal den the wolves had built together. "They made it themselves," James explained. "Started about 2 months ago. They've been sleeping there together every night." Elena watched as the 5 wolves emerged from the den, stretching and yawning in the afternoon sun. Ghost led the way, her white coat brilliant against the green grass. She paused, lifted her head and howled, and the others joined her, their voices blending into a song of survival and hope. The sound echoed across the mountains, wild and free and utterly alive. Elena closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. She thought about all the moments that had led here, the chance sighting on a desert highway, the decision to stop, the desperate rescue missions, the confrontation with a monster, the choice to keep fighting when it would have been easier to give up. She thought about miracles, not as divine interventions, but as the extraordinary things that happen when courage meets compassion, when someone sees suffering and refuses to look away. The wolves' howls faded into silence. When Elena opened her eyes, Ghost was looking directly at her across the distance. The white wolf dipped her head once, a gesture that looked almost like a nod of acknowledgement, then turned and led her pack back into the forest. Elena smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You're welcome," she whispered, as she drove away from the sanctuary that evening, the setting sun turning the sky to fire. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a new message. Another animal in distress. Another life that needed saving. Another chance to prove that miracles weren't rare gifts from above. They were choices made by ordinary people who decided that every life, no matter how small or wild or broken, deserved a chance. She answered the call. This is Dr. Elena Vargas with Rapid Response Rescue. Tell me everything. And the work continued, because somewhere out there, another animal was fighting to survive, hoping that help existed somewhere in the vast world. And now, because of 5 Arctic wolves and the people who refused to abandon them, that help was real. The miracle hadn't ended. It had only just begun. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever witnessed or lived something like this.